Mike's MMA Picks here with your Fight Morning Quick Card Breakdown show for MMA Oddsbreaker. We also are sponsored by BetDSI. I want to welcome everybody to the show where we have Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier 13 fights. And we're going to kick things off with a curtain jerker that is relevant for DraftKings purposes. We have a middleweight bout between Amedovski against Yaozong Hu. Hu coming in, dropping a third weight class here. We've seen him at heavyweight. We've seen him at light heavyweight. Now he's coming in at middleweight after a significant layoff. This is a silver medalist Greco-Roman wrestler who hasn't implemented a wrestling game since coming to the UFC. Amedovski is a banger. We've seen him throw caution to the wind against John Phillips. And I expect under the bright lights to see Amedovski try to follow a similar game plan here against Hu, who has shown some holes in his striking defense. Minus 130 for Amedovski with a DraftKings price of $9,000. Possibly one of the lowest owned fighters on the slate, taking on Hu, who we have some odds value here as far as DraftKings goes. Only 7,200 plus 100 underdog. This line is on the verge of flipping. I'll be picking Hu in this spot. He's shown some promise, though this is a low-level middleweight fight. Kick things off with an underdog hitting on Hu. Coffee is great this morning, my friends. Next up, second fight of the night, where we have Zhumagulov looking to right the ship after multiple UFC losses. Thought he was robbed against Paiva, coming in with a 13-5 record, minus 315 at the betting window. Zhumagulov has a win over Ulanbekov, is a fighter from Kazakhstan who is very well-rounded, though very bad optics. When you watch him fight, he tends to back himself against the cage, doesn't throw for much volume, has the potential to get taken down, but not against Jerome Rivera. Jerome Rivera, he has his own flaws. Number one, 26-year-old who is lacking in the strength department, can get put on his back and controlled for extended periods of time. 10-5 record, plus 245 underdog. DraftKings price of only 6,900. The thing about Zhumagulov is he tends to fight to the level of his opponents. I do think Zhumagulov is far and away the better fighter in this spot, though Rivera has a knack for making things interesting and trying to throw up flashy submissions, has a kicking game. I'll be picking Zhumagulov. I think that he's just going to be too much for this kid. Next up, where we have a middleweight bout between Omari Akhmedov fighting out of ATT. This guy is built like a bowling ball. 21-5-1 record. Taking on Brad Tavares, who looked great against Antonio Carlos Jr. We were able to see that takedown defense on display. Akhmedov is extremely durable. Tavares has shown some chinks in the armor. Both of these fighters are starting to get up there in age. I don't see much line value in Brad Tavares at minus 170. And a DraftKings price of 8,600. Akhmedov is an extremely tough fighter to put away. We've seen him in there against Ian Heinisch, Chris Weidman, etc. This fight, I think we're going to see it play out on the feet. Akhmedov is going to be looking to land the heavier strikes. Tavares is going to look to stay on his horse in the larger octagon in front of the T-Mobile Arena crowd. I think we're going to see Akhmedov land the more impactful strikes and come away with a decision victory in this spot. Tavares has the potential to finish this fight the later it goes. Tavares, we've seen him in there against Jocko and other fighters where he has a tendency to pour it on late, and Akhmedov has a tendency to fade, but I think that Akhmedov is going to bank some rounds here. So give me Omari Akhmedov at dog odds. Next up, where we have Jennifer Maia taking on Jessica Eye. Jessica Eye coming in, and you watch the fight against Araujo where she missed weight, ran into some issues on the scale, and besides being evasive and having great footwork, throwing strikes and being evasive, those are her two greatest strengths. Jennifer Maia, I do believe the success that she had against Valentina Shevchenko is baked into this current line as a -190 favorite. I believe that is wide, and an 8,800 price in DraftKings, I believe, is obscene. 18-7-1 record. Maia may be the heavier striker, may have the better ground game, maybe the stronger fighter, but she's going to have to close distance to get hold of Jessica Eye. And I see Jessica Eye trying to stay on her horse and make this an extremely competitive bout. I don't have a dog in this fight, but I'll be picking Jennifer Maia. The plus 150 on Jessica Eye looks a bit tempting considering she's been able to keep fights close, except for that Cynthia Calvillo fight. So if this fight does hit the mat, I think that Maia could land some significant control time. But the issue is she has to get this fight to the mat. Good morning, everybody. Great to be up. 6:30 a.m. ready to rumble. Massive fights to look forward to. 13 of them on the docket. Let's continue up this card where we have Dricus du Plessis, 15-2 record, South African fighter who came to the UFC and took a fight on very short notice, disposed of Marcus Perez, coming in at -115 and a DraftKings price of 8,200. And he's taking on a Trevin Giles who has a tendency to be in very close fights. Trevin Giles, -115, $8,000 in DraftKings. Sniper on the feet, looks to land that jab and is comfortable in the pocket. Only 28 years of age. Du Plessis is the full-time fighter. Trevin Giles, I really liked what I've seen from his game, barring the tendency to run out of gas late and also get caught in guillotine submissions. He is far and away the cleaner striker here. Du Plessis is going to look to be a marauder in some regard, look to land leg kicks. Trevin Giles has had an issue with not checking leg kicks. We are aware of that, but he also sets himself up to land counters. And the Roman Dolidze fight, impressed with his ground game in that spot. Though the longer this fight goes, Giles could potentially run into an issue. The thing, though, is Du Plessis has a tendency to get the job done inside the distance when he fights. And I'm not so sure that Du Plessis is going to have the better gas tank here. He throws these heavy hooks and is a physical guy out there. But I'm going to be picking Trevin Giles. I think that jab is going to be there all day. Du Plessis, his striking defense is a concern. Let's see. MMA Genie's here. You're not the man in the arena, Mike. Oh, I hope you are in the arena, my friend. T-Mobile Arena is going to be loaded, and folks are going to be frothing at the mouth. All eyes will be on the main event this evening. Looking forward to breaking that down as well. Let's continue to move up this card where we have Ryan Hall, 36 years of age, 8-1 overall record. That record is deceiving. He has sat on the sidelines for some time, has pulled out of a few fights. Plus 190 underdog, DraftKings price of 7,100, taking on Ilia Topuria, who has an unblemished record. And sometimes you look at those unblemished records and you wonder if fighters have been tested. And Topuria has. He took a fight against Zalal on short notice and really went. I'm surprised he did go the distance in that spot and was butchering Zalal on the feet and also having his way with Zalal on the ground, although he did get reversed a few times in the bout with Zalal. Then next comes Damon Jackson, slaughtered with body shots. Topuria has a ground game here. He is primarily a ground fighter, but this is a guy also who's fought at 135 pounds. Georgian descent, is a cerebral fighter when it comes to the ground game. But then you also have Ryan Hall, who welcomes a ground fight. And in this spot, Topuria, sometimes the confidence can be a detriment. And I hope that Topuria fights an intelligent game plan in this spot. I believe that if he goes to the ground, he could be asking for trouble. Although I do have faith in Topuria's ground game. I just don't. I don't want him to be going. I don't want him to be taking chances on the ground, potentially getting caught in heel hooks. We haven't seen Hall lock something like that up besides against BJ Penn, but there's such a massive discrepancy in skill set when it comes to volume and work on the feet. In this spot, Topuria is far and away the better striker. You watch Ryan Hall, he throws one strike at a time. Granted, he doesn't get hit often. He welcomes fighters onto the mat. Topuria is a black belt. We know how great Ryan Hall is. That Saul Rogers fight, though, you go back to 2015, pull out the Fight Pass and check that out. And the aura of invincibility is going to come into play with Topuria in this spot. But Ryan Hall, it's not like he's that he's invincible as well. Hall has taken a loss in the Ultimate Fighter House and he showed there are paths to victory. There are paths to defeat for himself in that spot versus Saul Rogers. And you watch the Gray Maynard fight, you watch the Darren Elkins fight. I'm not blown away by Ryan Hall here. I'll be picking Topuria, and I think he has a multitude of ways to finish this fight. I don't like the striking defense of Ryan Hall on the feet, and Topuria is going to be my pick. I apologize for being long-winded in that regard. Let's continue up and down this card here where we have Nico Price taking on Michel Pereira. Michel Pereira, 25-11 record. Now, that's deceiving. When he came to the UFC, he was more of a showman. Now he has shown some restraint and is able to implement a well-rounded game plan. He is the more talented fighter here against a Nico Price who has granite in his hands. Nico Price, 14-4 record, plus 145 underdog with a DraftKings price of 7,300. Pereira coming in as a minus 175 favorite. And I see the way this fight could potentially play out. I have concerns that Pereira may get sucked into a brawl here, and you saw him doing backflips at the weigh-ins yesterday. I'm concerned that he could get sucked into this brawl against Nico Price, who makes magic happen out there. There's no other way to put it. This has fight of the night written all over it. Price, though, besides having he has a ground game, has a nice jiu-jitsu game, but Pereira, I think, has him beat across the board in this spot. The only issue is if Pereira gets caught, and that's always a possibility against Nico Price. He's live in almost any fight, even against Vicente Luque. I go back to the fight against Tim Means, and Tim Means was lighting Nico Price up and then gets caught and gets his ankle broke. And oh man, that was rough to watch. But I'll be picking Michel Pereira. I think that he will get this done, and I think he's going to get it done inside the distance. Let's continue our way up the card, where we have a welterweight bout between Max Griffin and Carlos Condit. Max Griffin, 32-13 record. Been around the block. He's looked okay recently, but then you look at the level of opponents, Court McGee and Matt Brown, both guys who are on their way out of the fight game. I know Matt Brown had that knockout recently, but Carlos Condit, well-rounded fighter. His hole, though, is his takedown defense. And you look at DraftKings and the fighter logs. Carlos Condit, he gets put on his back often. And Max Griffin, sometimes you can trust him to implement a game plan. And in this spot, he's got to take Carlos Condit down. That is the path to victory here. Carlos Condit doesn't have many submissions off of his back, and Max Griffin with a 17-8 record. What's interesting is Max Griffin's, he's not a spring chicken. The time is now for Max Griffin. He's got to get in there and get his hands on Condit, take this fight to the mat, and if he gasses out, so be it. But that's his path to victory. He's got to out-grapple Carlos Condit and put Condit on his ass. Condit, though, is a dog, and in the T-Mobile Arena, I think that he's going to have some extra juice. So this is by no means a lock, but I'll be picking Max Griffin. Next up, main card, where we have Sean O'Malley taking on Chris Moutinho. Chris Moutinho, 9-4 overall record, coming out of Massachusetts. Took this fight on short notice, was handpicked basically by Sean O'Malley. O'Malley, 13-1 record. That record is deceiving. He, in his eyes, is undefeated, but we've seen the lower leg get chopped up. I don't think Moutinho is going to have the opportunity to get that done. I see this fight ending inside the distance, and you look at O'Malley as a -940 favorite. This line, even the inside the distance lines for O'Malley, -325. It's ridiculous, but I just wish they would have picked a better opponent for O'Malley in this spot. I think that we see O'Malley roll here. We see him get it done inside the distance, and I do see him paying off that $9,500 price tag. He is your highest price fighter on DraftKings, and O'Malley is like a snake out there striking, looking to land these punches and put Moutinho on his ass and get him out of there. And that's what I see happening in this spot. So give me O'Malley in that spot. Next up, where we have Irene Aldana taking on Yana Kunitskaya. Kunitskaya, 14-5 record, -110 at the betting window, 7,900. This fight's taking place at 135 pounds, but you have Aldana, who comes in here overweight, -120, 8,300. Aldana is going to look to use her boxing and stay at range. Kunitskaya, I have concerns watching her. I know that if this fight ends up being a war of attrition, you've got Kunitskaya who should break down Aldana if they get into a clinch game. If Aldana gets backed up against the fence and controlled, that's a real possibility. Aldana, though, should have success at space. You watch Kunitskaya's fight against Aspen Ladd. That was an eye-opener. Finished, brutalized on the feet. Aldana has shown some serious holes in her game, especially when it comes to fighting on the ground. Kunitskaya has to get this fight there to have success. Kunitskaya can get bloodied up and beaten. And also, you watch the Caitlin Vieira fight for Kunitskaya. Vieira was dominating that fight on the ground and controlling Kunitskaya, and that was one of those fights you go back to the judging, and Kunitskaya just wouldn't go away and ended up landing some significant elbows and strikes on the top of Vieira at the end of that fight. And I know she comes out of a great camp out of ATT, so not counting Kunitskaya out at all. I also have concerns about Aldana missing weight by such a wide margin in this spot. I'll be picking Aldana, but I see Kunitskaya as being a extremely live opponent here, especially the longer this fight goes. Aldana may hit a wall, but Aldana has to get up on the volume. She's the much cleaner striker in this spot, and this fight is in the larger octagon. Fights start on the feet, but it's up to Kunitskaya to try to close that distance. Next up, we head to heavyweights, where we have Tai Tuivasa taking on Greg Hardy. Now, this is an interesting bout where we have Tai Tuivasa, who's coming in with a 12-3 record, spent some time at American Kickboxing Academy, and he looked to shore up some big, massive holes in his game. We've seen him dominated on home turf, put on his back and grinded out. And he's taking on a Greg Hardy who has a tendency to perform well in the beginning of fights, and then for some reason the wheels just fall off. Greg Hardy plus 115 underdog, 7,800, and Tuivasa is coming in at 8,400 in DraftKings. Very interesting fight here, where we have Tuivasa, who I believe is the born fighter, where we have on the other side of the fight Greg Hardy, who's a natural athlete who is a former football player, and I'm surprised we haven't seen his cardio carry over into mixed martial arts. He makes bonehead mistakes in fights, has virtually no ground game. Tuivasa is going to be at a big reach disadvantage here. Greg Hardy is a massive individual, huge. Tip the scales at 264, and you have Tuivasa, who came in, a pound off, but Tuivasa is carrying a lot of adipose tissue. He's morbidly obese, and in his off season hasn't made a commitment to strength and conditioning. Born fighter, though, and the deeper this fight goes, I see Tuivasa being live, but Greg Hardy, there's some value here as far as the money line goes. And in DraftKings, I think we're going to see Greg Hardy come out here and start pumping that jab and look to move and force Tuivasa to come in and try to close distance to land his patented bombs, where he got Hunsucker out of there and Stefan Struve out of there. And there have been other fighters where he's disposed of them. So volatile matchup. It should turn into a very ugly fight if this ends up in the second or third round. I will be picking the underdog Greg Hardy here, though. I think that he is not only the better athlete, but he's a higher caliber trained fighter at this stage in his career, and that's really doesn't say much. I know he trains out of ATT, and it's just up to him. If he makes these bonehead mistakes, he's going to get in trouble again. But give me Greg Hardy in that spot. Now, wow, interesting fight where we have the co-main event here. We've got Gilbert Burns taking on Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Gilbert Burns coming in with a 19-4 record, 7,700 in DraftKings, plus 130 at the betting window. Taking on a Stephen Thompson who he's sitting at minus 160, and he has a DraftKings price of 8,500. Very interesting fight where we have this fight. Number one takes place in the larger octagon. Number two, the fight starts on the feet. Number three, Stephen Thompson is far and away the better striker, and has, number four, much better footwork here. It's going to be up to Gilbert Burns to close distance and land takedowns. I know that Thompson hasn't faced a wrestling heavy fighter or a fighter who's actively pursued takedowns. Gilbert Burns is going to be that guy, but he's going to have to close distance in order to get his hands on Wonderboy. I don't see him catching Stephen Thompson. I know Anthony Pettis was able to do that a few years ago, and I believe that was a fluke. 38 years of age for Stephen Thompson. Thompson's going to have to stay on his horse, be ready to counter strike. Gilbert Burns is going to have to come at him. And what's interesting is the inside the distance line. I actually like the inside the distance line on Stephen Thompson in this spot. I also like the fight doesn't go the distance prop. I believe that this fight is going to finish. I understand Thompson outpointing Gilbert Burns and trying to stay at distance, but if Stephen Thompson gets taken down, then this should be a wrap for Gilbert Burns because he is an extremely dangerous jiu-jitsu player. Good morning, sir. Super Babones. Great to see you on this Saturday morning, bright and early, almost 7 o'clock, ready to rumble. So getting back to this fight with Gilbert Burns and Stephen Thompson, I look at the tape and I watch Gilbert Burns get lit up at range versus a number of strikers, and the Dan Hooker fight comes to mind. No answer whatsoever for Gilbert Burns in that spot. Could not close the distance. You watch him against Kamaru Usman. I realize Kamaru Usman's an incredible fighter and the champion, but you shouldn't be getting completely pieced up at range, and that's what we saw. We saw him land a hellacious bomb on Kamaru Usman, yes, but then the tide turned and he did not have an answer for getting caught at distance, and I see that happening. One camp preparing for Stephen Thompson is not going to change your career and the way that you fight strikers. I'll be picking Stephen Thompson, though I realize that there is volatility to this matchup. I think that Thompson is going to get this done inside the distance. And I also believe that Gilbert Burns is a real threat here. It only takes one takedown for Gilbert Burns, as we've seen in like the Yan Xiaonan versus Carla Esparza fight, and there have been many others throughout the years. It only takes one takedown. And Thompson may have incredible takedown defense and also have great submission defense, but Gilbert Burns is another level. So he is a real threat here. But Stephen Thompson is light years ahead as far as striking, and the striking defense of Gilbert Burns is a real question. He also has been dropped a number of times. Oh, Evan's saying Burns is so hittable, dare I say chinny. I do believe yes. Unfortunately, you saw how frustrated he was in the Usman fight, and in other fights, he is very vulnerable to being caught. Let's move to the main event of the evening, where we have the trilogy. Dustin Poirier taking on Conor McGregor. Poirier coming in with his 27-6 record. This fight takes place at lightweight. We've seen the first two fights. Poirier now is the slight favorite at -135. Both of these guys have a DraftKings price of 8,100. McGregor 22-5 overall record. Hasn't been very active. We are aware of all the money that's poured into his bank account through the years, and we know money can't buy class. And I'm really, you watch all of the hype headed into this bout. You see what McGregor's trying to do, trying to get under Poirier's skin, and that may not be effective here. I think that Poirier is a extremely seasoned veteran. I've been to Poirier fights before. I've seen him get his leg chewed up by Jim Miller and show how durable he is in those spots. I've also seen that he comes out pretty locked in the early rounds, but even though he came locked in, he lost that first round to McGregor last time out. McGregor's a quick starter, and what's interesting is Poirier, his path to victory is surviving an initial barrage from McGregor, not getting caught at range like he did in the second fight as well as the first fight. You watch that first round, and McGregor was having some significant success. I believe that McGregor will be landing on Poirier, who under these bright lights, this is when Conor McGregor tends to shine. Granted, I don't think that McGregor is going to have a full 5-round gas tank. It's either he's completely dialed in and locked in for a few rounds, and then it just, he hits a wall, or he tries to extend himself and play a game that he hasn't played before. And that could be a recipe for failure, because Poirier is great at figuring fighters out. I think the leg kicks are going to come into play here, but McGregor should be ready for him this time around. Poirier, the more durable fighter, the longer the bout goes, but has a tendency to get caught early. And that is what I keep coming back to this. When I watch the fights, and I watch other McGregor fights, we know his gas tanking is an issue, but he is dialed in, extremely dialed in early, to a degree that we very rarely see. And I think that's what's going to happen in this spot. Either McGregor comes in early and takes Poirier out, or Poirier survives the initial exchange and then walks away with a finished victory later on in the fight. There are no certainties in this game. I will be picking Conor McGregor here. I understand the narrative here, and I also see how big of a favorite McGregor was in the second fight. And you look at how between fights recency bias can sway odds so dramatically, to the point where now McGregor not only is a dog, and rightfully so in some regard. I'd say this fight, if these guys fight 10 times, we could see Poirier winning 5, McGregor winning 5, right? But in this specific instance, where it's taking place inside of the larger octagon, with some time for both of these guys to train for one another, we know that Poirier put McGregor completely out. So that's another feather in Poirier's cap. He's got that going for him. It's a extremely volatile matchup, but I believe we're going to see McGregor come out on top here. The striking defense of Poirier, I think, is going to come into play early, and McGregor's got to know that this is his shot to take him out of there. Morning, Daniel. You're picking McGregor as well. Interesting. Yeah, I see there are many people on Poirier, and I understand that. I understand why. It makes sense, but I think that McGregor's just gonna under the bright lights is going to catch him. He's just so precise, so accurate early. And that, I believe, is going to lead to Poirier's demise. But that's why they fight, right? There are no certainties in this game. I want to wish everybody a tremendous fight day. You can check out my plays at MMA Oddsbreaker Premium, third-party tracked over at betmma.tips. You can follow me on Twitter at MikesMMAPicks. Appreciate everyone. We are ready to rock and roll. Go get yours, my friends. Let's do this. It's time.